Welcome to Scoreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey, and this is a sort of catch-all news episode.
Off-season content.
Yeah. Again, I think the last few episodes we've hinted about having this interview episode we were going to do, and it keeps not happening for various reasons. This particular time, it's because we were hiding in our basement during a massive storm that wrecked a whole chunk of the Midwest. Thankfully, we were left unscathed, but we were
just barely.
Yes, it missed our home by like a couple of miles. And
it was very scary.
When we were supposed to be recording, we were instead hiding in our basement. So that wasn't very much fun. But that's the joy of living in the Midwestern United States during spring and summer. But in the meantime, there's been a lot of just skating stuff happening during the off season, and we wanted to kind of catch up on some of it.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of news, and I think that we're going to continue to see this type of thing over the course of the next couple of months because we're leading into kind of a big deal of a season, and the news just keeps coming. So while in the past few years, when it gets into late spring, early summer, everything kind of goes quiet, nothing is quiet right now.
So one of the things that's just happening right now is it is show season. As we record this, Stars on Ice is touring in the United States, which is awesome because they did not tour here last year, which was highly disappointing, but is less awesome because it's not coming anywhere near us and just isn't within easy travel distance for us.
It's actually not going very many places. It's only got 6 tour dates. I'm really hoping in the tour after the Olympics that we'll see a much bigger tour. But it was kind of a bummer to see that it was only going to a few spots in the United States. It does look like it's a really interesting and fun show. It's a great group of skaters. And from everything we saw with the first 2 legs of the Stars on Ice tour, first in Japan and then in Canada, this is just a good time.
Yeah, I'm so jealous of everybody who got to see all 3 of these legs in Japan, Canada, and US because they have fantastic lineups. They look like they're so much fun. The skaters just look like they're having a wonderful time. And while I'm sure that the pace of that tour is kind of grueling, it was seeing how the Canadian show was wrapping up their last event. I think it was in Vancouver. And while they were essentially doing that show and traveling, the new cast that was joining in America had basically a couple of days to get together with Kurt Browning and Alyssa Sisney to learn choreography. And then maybe a day and a half to integrate with the rest of the touring team and then start the American tour. So that's a lot to juggle and to get on board with really quickly. But the theme of it this year with like the Rockstars on Ice seems really fun.
Great costumes.
Yes, the costumes are fantastic. Overall, it just seems like they're having an absolute blast. I just wish that it was coming somewhere closer to us because it's really frustrating to just not have it on the table.
Or at least, many years ago, Stars on Ice used to get broadcast. That doesn't happen anymore. So we're relying on any of you wonderful people who happen to be in the audience and take some video. That's the only way we're seeing anything. And some of that has been really interesting. When it was in Japan, it does, I believe, air there. And there are a few cuts that you can see online from Stars on Ice Japan, one of which I do want to mention is particularly interesting because it's Mao Asada, who was a special guest on the tour. She wasn't part of the official tour group, but Japan is fortunate and they bring in a lot of Japanese skaters to skate as guests alongside the touring company. And she did a Bolero there without a jump. And it was really beautiful, kind of mesmerizing to watch. So we'll put a link in the show notes because it is on YouTube, thankfully. I haven't seen Mao Asada skate in so long, so I was just amazed. She's just beautiful.
I'm just thrilled to see in this American leg of the tour that they have Chalk and Bates and Ilya and Isabeau, but that Amber is part of it.
Yes.
And of course,
and
Jason
Alyssa.
Brown and Alyssa. Yeah. They got everybody that you would want. I mean,
on the United States side. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they basically got all of the American superstars on this one, which is great. But I'm so happy for Amber Glenn because she had always dreamed about being on Stars on Ice. And last season, she won the national championships. And then they didn't have a Stars on Ice tour.
I know.
So she didn't have the opportunity to go, and she seemed like she was heartbroken about it. So that she's on it again as our reigning national champion and with this great team that is such wonderful vibes. I'm just thrilled for her and everybody involved, and it looks like it's so much fun. And again, so jelly.
So jelly. Well, outside of Stars on Ice, there's been a lot of program announcements and coaching changes and just general news. And the first one I want to mention is Kevin Aymoz, because I didn't realize until a few days ago that he is bringing back his Bolero program for the Olympic season. And from my perspective, that's news because that's exciting. That program has so much to give. It's also a war horse. And I know that that's always the do we really need that? I'm like, when it's Kevin Aymoz doing Bolero, we do. I cannot wait.
So he had done this Bolero program 2 seasons ago. And that's a very notable season because it started out amazingly. He did that program at Skate America. It was thrilling, and it just looked like it was going to be one of the best programs of the year. And then over the course of the rest of that season, pretty infamously, Kevin's skating devolved a lot to the point where he was just literally skipping jumps in his programs at the French Nationals and had just complete meltdowns at numerous events. It was just looking pretty rough by the end of it. Also, pretty famously, he bounced back super hard in this past season. We got to see him live at Skate America, which it just seems to be like Allen, Texas, and America is the place for Kevin Aymoz to skate because it seems to go really well for him. But he had such a great resurgence over this past season. And I think it's also kind of notable that he went through a pretty heavy restyling. He had fairly long hair in the previous season. He cut it short. He kind of changed up his look a little bit. And I just got to think that that program was so good, it would be a shame to lose it completely to a season that had gone that poorly. And I wonder if that's why he wanted to bring it back.
It is. In the interview where I saw it, and thank you to the folks at the Cutting Edge podcast, because they were the ones who told me this was happening. Thank you. But yeah, in his interview, he brought that up. He said that he really only got to skate this twice. And the last one he did at the Grand Prix final, he doesn't really feel like showed what it could really be. So he only really got to have that moment with it a couple of times. And therefore, he feels like there's a lot of little tweaks he could do to it to improve it and to make it fresher and newer and just continue to evolve it the way he would have liked to. And then also he's going to be changing the costume a bit.
Good.
He recognizes, it sounds like he doesn't want to be using the same costume after the heartbreak that came in the following performances that it sounds like he's not really counting as performances.
He's treating that like we treat bad sequel movies where they just didn't happen. Yeah. They came out, but the fan base is like, there is no such thing as Highlander 2 or 3. What are you talking about?
I was thinking of The Matrix.
But... I feel the same about the Matrix films. Yeah, it's like there's one and not the rest. So this is his chance to reclaim that. And it's funny, we participated in a group Instagram post with fs.skatingstand with Haley, who has been on the show before. And her question going into this next season was, what did we predict we were going to see? What kinds of stuff did we think were going to show up in people's programs? And one of the things that we said is that we did expect to see the war horses get brought out and things that had Olympic traditions behind them, because that always seems to happen around the Olympics. And this is Kevin bringing back a war horse, but it is one that we already know from him. And there's some extra history there for why he would want to reclaim this. And I think that strategically, it's a really good idea as long as it doesn't blow up in his face and completely melt down the way it did the previous time.
Something tells me it won't. And if it does, in the first few instances of the season, he will scrap it fast.
Yeah.
That is my feelings. He's in such a better place than he was. I have a lot of confidence, and I think it's actually a great mission on his part to say, to use your word, he's reclaiming it. No, I'm not going to let this end badly when it might be the best program he's ever had.
One of the other predictions we contributed to that fs.skatingstand post was our thinking that we would see a lot of cinematic pieces going into this next season. Looking at the success of Olivia Smart and Tim Deek with their Dune program and creating this very atmospheric type of musical athletic performance, that we would see more of those. Blockbuster. Yes, that was the word that we used for it. Blockbuster programs getting to familiar soundtracks where you could kind of write off the story. And I think the first team that we've seen come out the gate doing that is, of all people, Oona Brown and Gage Brown, the sibling American Ice Dance team.
Who are doing The Godfather because family.
This is a fascinating one.
I'm very curious.
They put out a pretty fun Instagram post with them styled like the Godfather in black and white, and it's very dramatic. And something that we talk about a lot is the challenge that sibling teams have when it comes to storytelling on the ice, because so much of Ice Dance leans into romantic themes, and clearly they cannot do that. So the question always is, how do we present things that engage the audience and tell a story without having to lean on that thing that so many other teams can go after, that romantic charisma? Oona and Gage have pretty traditionally been kind of a rock and roll team. Like, you see a lot of classic rock show up in their performances. They've done Muse, they've done Metallica, like they've done all kinds of different programs to rock, which I really appreciate. I think that's awesome. But I think that if they want to remain competitive in an extremely tense American lineup, especially with the return of the Shib Sibs, they need to bring something new to the ice. They need to bring something that's going to show off those storytelling chops and an ability to create drama. So it'd be really interesting to see if they make that happen with this.
I hope it's a really cool evolution for them. It could be cheesy, because that music can be a bit cheesy.
It's a little over the top.
It is, but that could work for them. I'm really curious. But to kind of stay in that line of blockbusters and warhorses, now another warhorse, Haein Lee is doing Carmen, her iteration of that. I'm excited, and I hope that this is a good piece for her to use to like feel powerful, because she's had such a up and down road. And while I am not necessarily the biggest fan of more Carmens, because we've seen so many, I just hope that it is something that just emboldens her and makes her feel like she can go out there and really kill it, especially considering the news we just saw with the KSU nullifying the suspension of both her and Young Yu.
It's interesting to see that finally drop. They had allowed Haein to compete at the end of the season, which is why we saw her at K Nationals and then Worlds, where she performed very well. In fact, outperforming Chaeyeon Kim there, which was a surprise. Young Yu did not get to compete at all this past season, and all that news and drama about that went down last season, and it's too much to get into here, and it has been endlessly bandied about online. But the end result is that the KSU and the legal proceedings that went around with it reviewed all of the information that they had, and they've been doing this for over a long period, and finally came down to a decision that the rulings that had originally been made were not based on full information, were not the correct options to go with, and they found that it had not been worthy of the level of penalty that they had applied to it. So basically that just gives them the green light to both compete this next season and makes both of them Olympic eligible for those 2 spots that Korea has, because we know that Korea did not manage to get 3 spots after Worlds, and they did not qualify to send somebody to the September event. So for a very competitive federation with really great skaters, that's tough. And so that means that going to this next season, you have Haein, you have Chaeyeon Kim, you have Young Yu if she does come back, which we haven't seen her at all for a while, but you also have Jia Shin entering the fold as a senior, and who I would expect to be extremely competitive amongst them. So it's fairly big news.
Yeah, that whole situation is interesting, and it's going to be an extremely tough competition for those 2 spots. And speaking of Chaeyeon Kim, we don't know her programs yet, but I believe she's working with Benoit Rochot. Again, I also saw she had bangs, which were very cute. I'm just excited to see what new she brings. The end of this past season was such a heartbreak for her. Then we later found out why. Maybe not entirely, but the fact that a contributing factor of having been involved in a car accident right before Worlds, which is just such terrible timing. And I'm just glad she's okay. I want a big season from Chaeyeon. I think she is entirely capable of it, and I feel like she deserves some redemption. Chaeyeon
had been my pick for the top of the world podium last season based on how she had looked at the beginning of the season. Yeah, it was really unfortunate to see her underperform at Worlds, but like you said, there is additional context there. We also know the Korean Fed tends to overcompete their skaters, and that can take a toll on them after a while as well. But I was a big fan of the Tron program that she did with Benoit last season. I thought it suited her really well. And we know that Chaeyeon commits to the bit, because she said she watched either Tron or Tron Legacy or both, I'm not sure, but something like 6 or 7 times so that she could keep the imagery of the film and the story it was telling in her mind. that is a real commitment to the storytelling you're trying to bring, and also kind of fits into that idea of like the blockbuster cinematic thing that we were talking about earlier. So I'm really fascinated to see what she and Benoit cook up this time.
I've also seen that Rion Sumiyoshi announced her programs. Her short is with Misha, her long with Shae Borne. I wasn't too familiar with the music, but she's working with great people. And Rion, I feel like, had a really great end to her season because she won the FISU, the university games. That was a bit unexpected and a really good way for her to like lead into her off season and build towards what I'm hoping will put her in position for a chance at one of those 3 Japanese spots.
She was fantastic at the World University Games. I was so impressed with her. I love Rion skating. I've been so excited about her over the last couple of seasons, but this season she has really amplified her artistic output, and her skating skills are so sharp. And she's also one of the few women skaters who has a quad. It still just doesn't quite get all the way around, but that quad toe is on deck. You know, she might have that ready, and I'm hoping for it. And with 2 really great choreographers working on these programs, it shows that she's very serious about making that run at both podiums throughout the season and obviously the Olympics.
Another Japanese woman who we have not heard from in a really long time, Rika Kihira. I saw her post recently about the fact that she has started doing program run-throughs, but she's still not able to really practice her jumps yet. There's always talk of, is this comeback happening? When is it happening? When are we going to see this brilliantly talented woman again? I'm really hoping that by this coming season, she's in the mix. I don't know what version we're going to see of her. She was so deeply competitive and brilliant, but it's been quite a long time since we've seen that version of her. So I'm not sure what to make of it, but it's a name to keep in mind and remind yourself that back in 2018, she was the thing. So it would be great to see her have that comeback like we saw from Wakaba recently.
Rika is a terrific skater, but yeah, it has been a while since we've really seen her, and it would be lovely to have her back on the ice. But also then from Japan, of course, we have Kaori Sakamoto, who apparently is right now in Montreal, and then I guess also in Toronto, maybe bouncing back and forth.
It was very amusing. It looks like she went to visit Riku and Ryu in Toronto. They both shared some really cute photos of her adventures in Toronto with them.
I somehow missed these. You did not show these to me, and you know how much I would love this, so I'm very mad right now.
I only saw them this morning, so we'll fix that
very
very
soon.
soon.
That's forgivable because you've been at work, but still.
Yeah. But they said that she had come to Toronto from Montreal. So based on that and her previous work with her, I am reading into that she was working with Marie-France Dupuis, which would make perfect sense because she has done programs with her. Her Chicago program last season was a Marie-France program. So my assumption, based on, it's an educated guess, is that she was working on choreo with Marie-France.
Yeah, and of course, that Chicago program was heavily debated by everybody because it didn't always serve her well through this past season until she was actually dynamite with it in the last couple of performances. However, Kaori has said that she wants next year's programs to be just a little simpler, to have a little bit less everything, because I think that Chicago program was probably the most challenging thing she's ever skated. And you could see that it was a little hard for her to keep up with at sometimes. And stylistically early on, it didn't feel like a good fit until, again, the end of the season where you finally saw Marie-France's vision for it. But it took a long time for Kaori to get that thing into shape so that it looked as good as it did. So I'm hoping that this time when they collaborate, that they're finding a better middle ground between those styles.
I also kind of hope that Kaori pushes a little bit more for what she wants, because I know that Marie-France was committed to Kaori doing Chicago, but I never really heard that Kaori was committed to it as much. Maybe she was, I don't know. But mostly it's just when I heard that, my first thought was Kaori should get the final say.
Yeah, it kind of sounded like she got pushed into it more than it was a thing that she wanted to do.
And But again, I could be misreading the situation. This is all conjecture in the off season where we're reading into things.
Another interesting bit of news coming out of ice dance is the move from the Chechnya sibling team of Natalia Taschlerova and Filip Taschler from their training group in Italy they're going to Helsinki in Finland to work with Maurizio Margaglio, who I believe is the coach for Tequila and Versluis.
And for Yuka Orihara and Juho Pyrinen.
Yeah. So in an Olympic season, to make a coaching change like that is pretty significant. But considering some of how this past season went for the Taschlers, it could be a very good move.
I think so. I mean, for one, that group has, I know we always talk about good vibes, but they always have good vibes. I get a very strong impression from that team, that club. There's another French ice dance team that works with them. So it's like there's good camaraderie. And I feel like, especially leading into a season that's going to be as stressful as this upcoming one, having that fellowship will be good for them. Also, a change of scenery is always good. We also saw right after the World Championships that they were all traveling together in New York, those 3 ice dance teams having a blast. So I kind of feel like in general, not only the coaching situation, but just that community might be really helpful for them to rebuild, because they really didn't have their best season. They fell back a bit. There's also the fact that, and I think you were the one who told me this, it's that there are rumblings that both of the Finnish teams after the Finnish Worlds that are happening, I think in 2027, may retire. So having this team, the Taschler team, could be really good for that coach as well, like building their future.
And the Taschlers, in their post about this, they didn't give a ton of information, but they did put like the Finnish flag, but also the American flag, which makes me think that they're going to be spending some time here in the States training as well. I don't know with whom yet. I haven't seen specific information about that. I didn't find it, but I'm a really big fan of the Taschler siblings. I really like their skating. And yeah, I think they've got some ground to reclaim this season because they did fall back a little bit, but I also thought that their material needed an upgrade. They're so good, but neither of their programs really looked ready to compete with the higher level teams this season. So I think that them going somewhere where they can make something fresh out of their programs and their partnership, I think could be a really good thing.
I think some of the biggest news we've seen in the past few weeks has definitely been the announcement that the Russians who are going to be competing at the qualifying event in September in Beijing were announced.
As neutral athletes. But only single skaters were picked. So the teams that had been submitted for both the pairs and the ice dance, as I understand it, were rejected. And therefore, since they were rejected, no alternates were named. So alternates weren't even considered because the people that they were submitting as their primaries were both rejected. They did not specify what rules were broken that made them not qualified to compete as neutral. I think some of it is fairly obvious if you've been online. I mean, when you have the ice dance teams who had Instagram posts of them at Putin rallies and stuff in support of the war on Ukraine, I mean,
it was pretty blatant.
Some of it was pretty loud and proud. It's no surprise. The qualification standards were very clear. You cannot at any point have openly supported the war on Ukraine. And several of those teams had been at rallies and essentially fundraiser propaganda events and stuff.
Right. So as an outsider looking in, it's very clear as to those rules that were broken. I do think it is interesting that the alternates weren't even considered because of that, but I'm sure that there are reasons.
It was opaque. I think that they should have been clearer about those reasons.
I agree.
And the Russian Fed is appealing and obviously was very angry about that. But also the Russian Fed has traditionally in the past kind of gotten away with a lot of things. And so being held to standards is not something they're kind of used to. So I think the curious thing about it is that Adilia Petrosyan was named as the women's competitor, which is no surprise. That's what everybody expected.
It was absolutely expected.
But one of the restrictions for their neutral competitors is that they could not, one, have supported the war, or two, been a direct training partner of somebody who had been guilty of doping. So they weren't supposed to come out of any camps like that. And of course, Petrosyan comes from Etiri's camp, where Kamila Valieva was training. So it does raise an eyebrow there. However, Etiri is also currently coaching numerous skaters for Georgia and elsewhere within competition.
Right.
Not
She's
just for
at
Russia.
competitions all the time.
Yeah. So I feel like they probably were in a stuck position there where they couldn't say, well, she trains out of the same place that trains Kamila Valieva, but also that was 4 years ago and Petrosian is younger.
Yeah. It would have been way too messy. And like you said, Etiri is currently training active competitors that are not from Russia. It would have been very hypocritical to not allow Petrosian in.
It just makes for sort of a morally or ethically or just rules-wise gray area for like not being sure what to do with it. But one way or another, Adelia Petrosian is the women's pick who will go in September for that competition. And then Peter Gumanik is the pick for the men. I'm not familiar with him, so I don't know who he is.
I read his bio and he sounds like he has all the stuff. So I am curious to see him in September because I've never watched him skate. Adelia, I would be shocked if she didn't just go in there and demolish and win the whole competition.
You're talking about in September at the qualifying event. Yeah.
Yes, I'm not talking about the Olympics.
Right, yes. I think that the impact of neither pairs nor ice dance getting a Russian neutral team is potentially a big sigh of relief for a lot of other people who will be going to that September event. Now, of course, there are appeals. This will get drug out. It'll be interesting to see if the ISU really holds its ground on this or not. But to just not have an additional team in both of those areas competing for 4 spots, I think are on the line.
Yeah, I mean, it's not many.
Yeah, so you got to think that for a lot of other teams, they'd be really happy to not have these competitors that basically come out of nowhere. I mean, even though like that ice dance team was well known and they were...
I mean, they were Olympic medalists.
Right, yeah. So not having them there would benefit everybody else. I've seen numerous people say that they're like, yeah, the guy in that team scrubbed his Instagram of all of the posts that where he had shown his support in the past so he could point out and be like, I didn't do any of those things that you wouldn't let me get qualified for. And they're like, no, screenshots exist. Like,
yeah,
it was pretty, you were pretty open.
It's exhausting. But one way or another, we're going to see some interesting stuff at that qualifying competition in September. I am really curious about that already. I know it's only May, but I am very eager because not only them, but we're going to see Reed and Amber Levicius there trying to get their spot. We're going to see probably Luna Hendricks there skating to hopefully earn that second spot for Belgium. It's going to be an interesting group.
Yeah.
On a much lighter note, we saw today that several members of the U.S. team are currently doing their Olympic photo shoots happening at the NBC Universal Studios in Los Angeles right now, which is really just fun to see, but also just sort of fascinating to see who they are putting out as like we expect these people to be at the Olympics almost a year ahead of time. As you would expect, Ilya is there and Alyssa is there and Amber is there. I haven't seen any other faces yet, but I'm curious.
This is one of the marketing strategies that is always a little bizarre to me. A full year before the Olympics, they start doing the photo shoots and start putting on. And I get like,
and they have to.
It's a big production to make these things happen for sure. But it does sometimes lead to people being plastered all over the marketing who then don't make it to the Olympics.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. And we've seen in the past previous season, NBC would lean really heavy on Isabeau, even when she wasn't the national champion. I think after Amber won the first time, they still kind of stuck with Isabeau as their face. And then, of course, last season, she wasn't really in competition for a lot of it because of injury. We did get to see a nice performance from her at Worlds. But yeah, it seems like at this point, they've realized that they need to. I mean, obviously, Alyssa is your literal golden girl right now.
She is your world champion. And if you look at the marketing materials on the side of the building for Milano Cortina, it is Alyssa Liu.
Yeah, like massive image of her in that gold dress and everything.
I mean, could it be more perfect?
Yeah. But that Amber is involved in, because again, your national champion, our Grand Prix final champion.
Was only beaten once this season by Alyssa.
Yeah. I mean, technically twice if you count world team, but
okay.
But still, She had a brilliant season, and yes, she deserves to have that respect put on her name. So with no disrespect to Isabeau, because I would love to see her in the mix as well. I hope she's there
too.
Yeah, she should be. It was really great to see all of that.
And it was fun to see things like Ilya at NBC Upfronts. I loved seeing all of the photos he was sharing of him and like Daniel Radcliffe. And they had him in so many photos and obviously speaking on stage with basketball players. So Ilya looked so small next to them. Like, he's not that small, but when you put him next to someone who's like 7'2" or something, it was just kind of a comical thing. And I'm like, could you have not done that, guys?
Well, that's why they put him with Radcliffe, because Daniel Radcliffe is like 5'5".
Yes, he's taller than Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah, so he had that going for him. Yeah.
But then saw this gorgeous photos from the Gold Gala in Los Angeles where Alyssa was. So it's just been fun watching them on Instagram, kind of touring around and also just hopefully broadening some awareness about figure skating again. Now that we have the 2 singles champions in the world in the US, it's like, please use this. Help build the name of skating again. Like, it would be wonderful to see more of these faces in more places. The last thing I want to mention has really nothing to do with anything other than nostalgia. I don't know how many folks are on Instagram, but I kept seeing these adorable, incredibly cute photos being posted by Brian Boitano of his adventures with Katarina Witt over the past week. And I got to tell you, if you had any kind of fandom like I did for either of these skaters whenever they were at their peak, I recommend just going and looking at it, because it's just could not warm my heart more to see those 2 legends running around Germany together on bicycles, taking photos and just being the cutest besties. Not that that really has much to do with anything about the sport, but it does in the sense that just makes you feel good.
Well, they are legends of the sport who are also aging fantastically.
They both look great.
And Brian posted today photos of them at the Berlin Wall.
Yes.
Because when the wall originally came down, they were together when it happened. And so with them traveling together in Germany, that this was a chance for them to visit that space. That was something that was obviously a big deal for Katarina Witt and for the world in general when that took place. And it's an event that occurred while they were in each other's company. And now it's 40 some odd years later and they're still friends and they're doing that together. And I thought that was really brilliant.
It was. And it makes me kind of want to cry in a good way. It's so, so sweet. And I think Brian was there to give her an award at the European Cultural Awards Gala, but it's obvious that their adventures lasted much longer than that. And to have a 40-year friendship between 2 skaters, I mean, international besties are your favorite thing. And they are the epitome of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up this news episode. I'm not even going to call what next week's will be because at this point, I just have no clue.
Yes.
But
we'll be here. We'll be talking about skating. And hopefully you'll listen.
Yeah. So if we missed anything, let us know in the comments.
Please share news we're not talking about. I want to know.
Yeah. Tell us which aspects of these news pieces that you are excited about, or, is there something you've rolled your eyes at? Are you excited for the war horses? Are you very tired of them? What other big cinematic blockbuster pieces do you think are on their way? We would love to hear from you. And for Scoreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we will talk to you next time.
Bye.